You're going to bankrupt your mama's company.
At least I have the radio to keep me company.
On 93.5 and 107.5, The Fan.
So here we are on a Tuesday. At least it's warm out. But it's a little overcast. It's kind of one of those gray. You look outside and you're like, when did I move to Philly? But there is a ton to talk about. A ton to talk about today. And let's recap. We'll get right to it. And we have a loaded show lined up for you. By the way, a big week lined up, actually. Because it is weird. Let me tell you something that's weird about being a sports radio host in 2025 and 2026 in the city of Indianapolis and the great state of Indiana, okay? When the Pacers went to the NBA Finals, one of the great things about the Pacers going to the NBA Finals was there is a legacy, not necessarily of great teams, but there have been for the last certainly quarter century. But there have been great personalities and great players that Pacer fans have fallen in love with over the years. And we had a ton of them on. During the NBA Finals, I mean, we had on Austin Crosher, we had Antonio Davis, we had, did we have Dale? We had Rick Smits. We had some of the great players, Darnell Hillman, I think, joined the show. We had great players from yesteryear over the course of time. I think Jermaine O'Neal at some point we had on. We went back and talked to different players from different eras of the Pacers about what this meant. When Purdue went to the Final Four, we had on Rick Mount. I can't remember if we had Joe Barry Carroll or not. We had, Brian Cardinal. We had Brad Miller. We went back and we found great Purdue players, and there have been a ton of them over the course of the years to talk to them about what it meant and what a celebration it was. And if the Colts were able to make themselves a push to the Super Bowl, we would have, I'm sure, obviously, probably John would have Peyton Manning, and I'd have Reggie Wayne, and we'd have Dwight Freeney, who we've had on, and Robert Mathis, and, Eric Dickerson. I mean, there have been great players and personalities, and we talked to them about what it meant. For Indiana football, it's a little more challenging because the reality is, and part of what makes this such a unique, special story is the fact that you don't have the depth of history or personal connection with players like you have with other franchises. Because the history has been so non-existent, frankly. And while there have been good teams and good players there, they don't have the oomph resonance the way this team, for example, will. I mean, I would imagine that, even though he was only there for 2 semesters, Fernando Mendoza is forever going to be embedded in the hearts and the minds of Indiana sports fans. Elijah Surratt, certainly, Aiden Fisher, Omar Cooper, it goes without saying, but he's a born and bred guy. So that's not to say that we are not going to do that and talk to people about what is this massive story of Indiana football. And I have a question about Indiana football and Indiana basketball that I will get to later in the show. But I will let you know that on Thursday, in my opinion, and maybe I'm a little bit age biased there, but in my opinion, the greatest player in Indiana football history, Anthony Thompson, will join the program on Thursday. Heisman runner-up, should have won the Heisman, and then worked within the athletic department at Indiana University, and I think I talked to him earlier today, huge excitement and pride for Anthony Thompson about what is happening and what's going on. But I talked about just then the Colts and the significance of if the Colts were to go to the Super Bowl, the wide array of players that we could have on, that this city has fallen in love with. But the one misfortune for the Colts, and one of the situations that we're in now, is that by and large, the great players in Colts history, the true connection in Colts history, is an era and a half. That's it. And at some point, we have to come to grips with the reality that this is a franchise that is mired in mediocrity. It is a mediocre franchise. And I know that that's, listen, nobody wants to be wrong about that more than listen, nobody wants to be wrong about that more than I. I don't mean that as some sort of a flame-throwing indictment on them, but rather to simply say, if you look at the numbers indicate this is an average franchise. Now, what I found interesting is yesterday, Shane Steichen talked with the local media, and Shane Steichen talked about the fact of, if you look, and we have run the numbers, Chris Ballard in his tenure is 70, 78, and 1. I mentioned that the Irsay family, at the time that they have had ownership of the Colts, from Bob Irsay to Jim Irsay to now Carlie Irsay-Gordon, they're just slightly over 500. As a matter of fact, I take that back. Jim Irsay was slightly over 500. And a lot of that is the Peyton Manning era. And the reality of the last handful of years, it's been that long since they've been to the playoffs. It's been that long since they've won a division. They've won a playoff game in the Ballard era.
Postseason.
And Shane Steichen talked yesterday about going 500 as this team was 8-9 this year. This is what he had to say about a 500 season.
Very disappointing season. Didn't go the way we wanted it to go. I hate it for our fans. I hate it for our players. It wasn't good enough. Bottom line, 500 in this league is not good enough. And I'm honored to be the head coach here and privileged to be the head coach here. And I'm going to do everything in my power and work tirelessly to get this thing fixed this offseason so we can get over the hump and get into the postseason.
He is definitely privileged to be the head coach. And if you were to pick between Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen, the one of the two that most people feel needed to be changed, it would be Ballard over Steichen, and that strictly is because of length of tenure. But if you want to sit here and tell me that 500 is not good enough in this league, at some point as a franchise, they're going to have to do something about it. This franchise right now is stuck in the middle of this vat of suck, and I don't know what the way is out, because you are now pinning your hopes. You've heard it. And a few good men, please tell me you're pinning your hopes on more than phone calls and footlockers. And the Indianapolis Colts are pinning their hopes on contracts and Achilles repair, because they haven't even signed Daniel Jones yet. It seems like a fait accompli that they're going to do that, partially because I don't know who else is going to be knocking down his door. He played well for them until all of a sudden he started getting blitzed. That seemed to open up the playbook on how you play Daniel Jones and get him uncomfortable. And then we couldn't even see whether or not Pittsburgh sent out that blueprint to the rest of the league, because as soon as Daniel Jones had to start contending with different looks, he had the injury. And then he had the ruptured Achilles. So what you have now is a franchise that does not have a first-round pick this year, that does not have a first-round pick next year, that does not have under contract right now a starting quarterback for next year unless it's Anthony Richardson, and they clearly have turned the page on that. And you could safely say it doesn't seem to have a clear vision. It doesn't seem to have a clear vision. I know Seinfeld is a show 30 years old, but I reference it from time to time because it's still on television all the time. And there's the famous clip in Seinfeld where Jerry Seinfeld is trying to rent a car, and he says, anybody can just take a reservation, and he's showing how reservations are just like floating through the air. It's a matter of holding the reservation. And for the Colts team, in terms of anybody can just think of an idea and a game plan, and I'm doing the Jerry Seinfeld thing. It's a matter then of executing a game plan and a vision. And in terms of the latter, they suck. Because this team right now, seemingly as a franchise, has no direction. And yesterday when I was on the air, I said to all of you, what I was going to do was try to play the role of objectivity by simply spelling out for you what I thought should have happened. And then, because we knew going into it, when I was on the air yesterday for 3 hours, what I knew was this. What I knew was that Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen were going to be brought back for another year with the Colts. What I didn't know was why. Because Carlie Irsay-Gordon had not yet spoken. and she was to speak at 2:30 in the afternoon, and we were to carry that live. And so when we came back and I was getting ready to throw it out to Carlie Irsay-Gordon, I'm looking at the monitor, knowing that she's about to start her press conference. And I know I have to do in this line of work what's called tap dancing, treading water, filling time until I have to throw it to her. And, of course, my job is to make sure that you folks at home don't know necessarily that that's what I'm doing. And that's fine. I mean, that's the job description. It's what I'm paid to do. But I had spent the better part of the show elaborating on and discussing what I thought should happen, and I think I've been pretty clear. At some point, you have to say, and there is never a perfect time for change. There's never an easy time for change. But for this franchise, the time has come. The time has come because there's no reason to believe that next year's going to be any different. There's no reason to believe that next year's going to be any different. But we hadn't yet heard from Carlie Irsay-Gordon. So I was trying to explain what I was anticipating being her rationale for bringing those two back. And I think several people misunderstood that as me saying the rationale. And I understand that. I wasn't. I was simply saying I anticipate probably what we're going to hear is this. Or if this is the reason, I hope we hear an explanation as to why she believes that to be valid. But in terms of the justification for this decision, in terms of that, Carlie Irsay-Gordon came out and said, you have to look at the way the season began, and that's the truer identity as to who the Colts are. And yesterday she explained that the season essentially came down to the best of times and the worst of times.
To our fans, my sisters and I want to extend our heartfelt gratitude for your loyalty and support, as always, but particularly this season. You're right to be frustrated with how the latter part of our season went. I'm pissed. We are all pissed. Every season is unique, and this season really was a tale of two seasons in one. We were all encouraged by our first half. We experienced a lot of progress, which gives us optimism for the future and the direction we are heading as a team. Then, adversity struck. But no matter what the circumstances are, we have to be able to find a way to win and finish games. Even though we didn't get the results we expected, I'm confident in what we're building and how we're building it.
Okay. Adversity struck, meaning key players were out and the injury bug rose its head.
It all plays into the decision that we make today. I don't think it's an either or. You know, what we saw as far as the progress, and Shane was able to adapt and change the way how he works on the roster and assembles the roster, and we believe that he is capable of replicating that next season.
Okay, here's the problem with all that. Here's the problem with all of that. Number one, adversity struck, and injuries and the way that Shane Steichen handled it. The way Shane Steichen handled it is irrelevant because they lost every single game. And they went under 500. And by Shane Steichen's words, not mine, Shane Steichen's words, not good enough. Secondly, what leads you to believe that seeing adversity, that's the ultimate test? Carlie Irsay-Gordon yesterday failed in that press conference for the following reason. And I understand it. She's not used to being in front of cameras. This is a new experience for her. While she has been somebody that has been in the forefront, she has not dealt with press conferences a lot. I totally get it. It's not even necessarily her fault in that regard. But where she failed was people wanted clear, strong, decisive explanation, and they wanted to be convinced that the owner of the Indianapolis Colts was completely convinced and had strengthened her conviction of her belief. And I don't think that came across. And if it did, even that, I would be complaining about the fact that it's an error in judgment. And I'll tell you why. Chris Ballard, when faced with adversity, virtually every time has the wrong answer. Has virtually every time the wrong answer. And his entire tenure as a Colt general manager, more often than not, has been something of overcoming adversity, more often than not, that he created. And yes, Andrew Luck retired. I get it. But you know what? That was like 4 lifetimes ago in NFL terms. His very first coaching hire, he announced the head coach before he had him under contract, and then had to come back and walk it back and say, the rivalry's back on because McDaniels stayed in New England. The rivalry's back on. Rivalry's back on? What are you talking about? But he erred there from the very get-go. And decisions he's made to try to repair things. When Andrew Luck retired, he made the decision, and I understand it late in the year, to go with Jacoby Brissett. But then after that, finding a new quarterback, he continued to make the wrong decision. And then it came down to drafting a quarterback finally when the sands had gone through the hourglass. And you have to make the decision of drafting a franchise quarterback. And he went with Anthony Richardson, which was a swing and a miss. Now, is that because the Colts put Richardson in the wrong spot and made the wrong decisions, handed him the keys too early? Maybe. Those were all decisions of the Indianapolis Colts, whose general manager was Chris Ballard and is Chris Ballard. One of two things is true. He either made the wrong decision in the player itself, or he made the wrong decisions in how to develop that player. Because either way, Anthony Richardson's time as a quarterback in Indianapolis seemed to 100% be done. And when you have a top 5 pick, most general managers dream once in their life, give me a top 5 opportunity to draft a quarterback. And he avoided it and avoided it and avoided it and avoided it. And finally, the time came where he was painted in a corner. He's like, I'm going to have to draft one. And he took the wrong one. And then he had to going with quarterbacks that we'll see what can happen, because he'd kicked the can down a couple times, and he went with Daniel Jones, and it looked like that might have been, in fact, the right decision. But that quarterback got hurt. Your season went under 500. By Shane Steichen's words, not good enough. And you know what is the true testament of a winner? You know what is a true testament of a champion? No matter what walk of life you're in, it's not really always about making every time the right decision. And it's not always every time about foreseeing what is the path to success. Oftentimes, it's about anticipating the route that wants to take you to failure and being able to correct on that, either through proactiveness of being ahead of it, or by immediately having a plan B to go to when all hell breaks loose. What's my favorite saying? It wasn't raining when Noah built the ark. And in the case of Chris Ballard, the rain started coming, and he didn't have an umbrella. Because they have routinely made the wrong decisions. They have routinely done the wrong thing. And if you want to tell me that Chris Ballard gets another opportunity because of the fact that the season was split into 2, and because of the fact that the second half of the season, they looked like things were going well, then you have to look at, okay, but what about the second half or the 2 acts or the totality of his tenure? You can tell me about this year has to be equated as something of promise because you look at the year in totality. I say, okay, that's fine, but what about looking at the Chris Ballard tenure in totality and not judging it on a 10-week sample size when you had 9 years and 70, 78, and 1, a playoff game of victory, and seeing the rest of the division win multiple titles since you won your last one? What about that when it comes into evaluation?
It all plays into the decision that we make today. I don't think it's an either or. What we saw as far as the progress, and Shane was able to adapt and change the way how he works on the roster and assembles the roster, and we believe that he is capable of replicating that next season.
Okay. Yesterday to me felt like when you have the first time that either a political candidate is doing a debate or a victorious political candidate is giving their first state of address. And then afterwards, the pundits come on and they critique what was said. And that's probably unfair to Carlie Irsay-Gordon, except for this. She is the CEO and owner of a largely publicly subsidized NFL franchise. And in that capacity, she absolutely has the free market right as the owner to make the decisions she feels are best for her franchise. But she also has to understand, as does the organization, that with that comes an expectation amongst the fan base for a very clear, a very strong, and a very convincing explanation of those decisions. And I just don't think yesterday we saw any of that. Not entirely her fault. She's not used to that situation. Understood. You could maybe even make the argument that they need someone now that is a very clear, definitive. I mean, Chris Ballard probably, and we will eventually hear from him. But whether it be Chris Ballard or someone else in the franchise needs to better sell this fan base. Because I got a news flash for everybody. The vast majority of people aren't sold. They're not sold on Chris Ballard. And maybe they're not sold on him because it's the same old song and dance every year. Opening press, I can tell you right now, we can run, he's going to talk in a week or whatever it is, we can run last year's. Look, I'm not going to lie to you guys. It wasn't good enough. I mean, I know it wasn't good enough. I'm as frustrated as the rest of y'all. I just am. Blink the eyes. Not good enough. Rinse and repeat. And then once the roster is set, I can bring it all back up again, and it's going to be the same as last year. Look, we got a good roster, guys. We got 53 guys. I mean, any of you guys want to talk about that? I mean, frickin' Bowen, what position are you unhappy about now? Yada, yada, yada. And then we don't hear from him the whole year. And that's their right, but that creates in people that pay their hard-earned, good, well-earned money to go down and support this team, and they tailgate, and they buy shirts, and they buy hats, and people in this town want to see their teams. I don't think that people expect to win every game, but they expect the franchise to present it as such that they're doing everything they can to win every game. And you are allowed. The Pacers are the prime example. The Pacers right now have injuries, and they're 6-30. And yet people are willing to deal with that because the Pacers, A, have recency of success, and B, have track record of the blueprint paying itself off. Yeah, they've had some drought years, don't get me wrong, and some drought periods, and people got PO'd. People got restless. And the Pacers finally said, you know what, you're right. So we're making a move. Turner, Sabonis, no more. We're bringing in Halliburton. We'll see what happens. Boom. All of a sudden, finals. And then they get hurt. And you look at it and people say, but at least I see light at the end of the tunnel. And people are frustrated with the Colts because not only is there not light at the end of the tunnel, the reality is the entire totality of time in Indianapolis has, for the most part, been a tunnel, except for when you had Peyton Manning and Andrew Luck with a lantern and a flashlight. That's the reality. Them's the facts. Yesterday, I was trying to predict what it was that would be said to justify this decision. Today, I am here to, again, I think, speak for the masses in saying that justification wasn't a good enough sell. It wasn't. And I hope I'm wrong. And I will stand here from the mountaintops and gladly tell you I was wrong. But if I was a wagering man, I would tell you that when we are sitting here in January of 2027, we're probably having the same conversation. We're probably having the same conversation. You'll beat Tennessee twice. That's cool. Houston, Jacksonville, you feel like you're going to unseat either of them in the AFC South? Zach Kiefer has been on top of this as well. He is a Colts beat writer. He obviously knows this franchise well. He also has colleagues that have done features on Carlie Irsay-Gordon, and Zach is going to join us next on the program. Also, Stephen Holder joining us today. Scott Agnes, we will talk a little bit about the Pacers, who are in action tonight taking on the Cleveland Cavaliers at the Fieldhouse. A reminder to all of you as well, this Thursday, at Axel's over on Carrollton, Axel's Garage, 5 until 7. I'll be there again as part of our Mick Ultra and Zinc Distributing Hoops Challenge, Mini Hoops Challenge. I love it. It's awesome. Come out, get yourself a Mick Ultra. Hang out with the camaraderie, talk sports, tell me where I'm right, tell me where I'm wrong. But also get your chance to do the Mick Ultra Mini Hoops Tournament. Simply get your score, get it recorded. If you are the high score after the sessions that we've done for this, then you are on your way to Milwaukee to see Miles Turner take on his old team, the Blue and Gold. And you're going to get a hotel voucher and the whole deal from Zinc and Mick Ultra. That is this Thursday from 5 until 7. Zach Kiefer is next.
on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Hey, Jake, you just said on the radio that Ballard chose the wrong quarterback. Which one was the right quarterback? I remember it being a choice between Richardson and Levis. No, what I'm saying is, first off, they painted themselves into the corner because he had waited too long before finally deciding that the time had come to take a quarterback. And there were other opportunities, for example, and DeForest Buckner's been a great player, don't get me wrong. But you traded for DeForest Buckner to have him come play and win one playoff game. And for, that year, Justin Herbert was available. I'm just throwing out a name. But there have been other years or other players that were available, and they kept kicking the can by, if you remember when they got Matt Ryan, it was like the 11th hour. Literally, they turned the lights on at the bar at 3:45, and it was like, oh, there's one guy over there. Okay, great. What do you got going on? So they waited so long. Joining us now on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line, Jake25 is the discount code for 25% off the fabulous, amazingly smooth Colombian coffee, the Wrangler Energy, or the Liquid Science Hydration beverages at Java House, javahouse.com. Zach Kiefer joins us on the program. Zach, let's begin with this. What was your reaction to, I will say the press conference of Carlie Irsay-Gordon, but more so just the explanation on the decision to retain Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen?
Yeah, Jake, if I could be totally blunt, we'll start here. You got to give her credit for talking so soon after the season, for explaining to the fans why she made the decision she did. She's still a new owner, and all that is relevant here. But I walked away from yesterday, if I'm a Colts fan, really discouraged. It did not answer the questions that they have. It just did not advance the conversation at all. Look, and these are her decisions. She can make whatever decision she wants. She can keep Chris Ballard. She can keep Shane Steichen. But I just felt like I never got an answer why. And her rationale didn't add up to me. It felt like Chris Ballard was being evaluated for one season of work, not 9 seasons. And really for 8 games of that season, not the final 9. And I understand injuries were a part of what happened. You talked about it. Everybody's talked about it. But she sat up there and said that injuries will never be an excuse. Everything she decided and everything she elaborated on made me feel like the injuries were absolutely part of the equation. And the other issue I had was, are these guys tied together? What are the stakes for 2026? She didn't answer those. Like, I just felt confused at the point where it's like, well, if they're not tied together, if the urgency's higher, which I heard 5 or 6 times, why wasn't it high this season? And I just felt, if I'm a Colts fan watching that, this franchise is in a sorry state. It just really is. Mediocrity has become the norm. It's become tolerated. And 7-game stretches that are really good are now celebrated. And I just couldn't help but think, and this is not a fair comparison. I understand that. But when Jim Irsay sat up there at that podium, you knew where he stood. He was authentic to a fault, and he wouldn't have put up with this injury excuse. And I just don't feel like I got a reasonable explanation of why these decisions were made.
Zach, let me ask you a question that maybe we don't even know the answer to this, but I'm curious if you have heard this even be speculated, I guess. And it's understandable what I'm about to say. Is it possible that Carlie Irsay-Gordon couldn't per se say this, but is it possible that the reason that Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen were retained is because there's safety for her and familiarity, because right now there are bigger business fish to fry in terms of getting everything aligned in the estate taxes and, all of the things that go into a transfer of power, that simply it's not necessarily that she didn't want to make a move. She just can't do that right now because there are other priorities that are taking place, which sounds absurd, I realize. But is there the possibility that's in play?
The estate situation is real, but let me be totally clear here. That cannot come in the way of any football decisions. And I believe it was Kevin Bowen that asked her about the financial situation and whether that factored into the decisions. And she said, nothing is getting in the way of us making the best decisions for this team. I'm going to hold her to that. I'm going to believe her on that front. But the reality is, this is a comfort. This is a comfortable decision. This is the easy decision to run it back. And it's probably not the best thing for her to sit up there and say, why are we going to fire Chris right now if we're going to bring in another GM and then Shane's not going to be his guy? It's very clear that she's very high on Shane Steichen. She called him a bright young coach. She believes in his ability to call an offense. I think he's proven that. Now, the rest of the job is very important as well, and that's being a head coach. There are certainly questions about that. As for Ballard, and I wrote this morning with my colleague Jordan Rodriguez, who's been in town to talk to a lot of executives, as well as Carlie Irsay-Gordon for a profile that ran last week. The reality that it's impossible to dance around is there is comfort with Chris Ballard. He has been a mentor and a supporter to Carlie Irsay-Gordon throughout this time. It was him and Frank Reich that encouraged her to go down on the field and find out what was really going on before she took over for her father. So, he's more than an employee to them. Now, my stance would be, you need to make this decision with your head, not your heart. That's what her dad would tell her to do. But the reality is, Chris told her and her sisters in the last year, do not ever let our relationship get in the way of doing what's best for this organization. Essentially saying, if you need to get rid of me, get rid of me. I understand. And the reality is she's not ready to do that. I just walked away from yesterday without a fairly good understanding of why, because they were good for 8 games. It just feels like, and I know you were talking about this a minute ago, Jake, it just feels like you're going to be having the same conversation 12 months from now, which is why this fan base is so pissed off.
Zach, here's the thing, and Zach Kiefer is our guest, by the way, from The Athletic. He has a column up right now about all of this up at The Athletic, and, of course, longtime writer for the Colts now with the NFL in totality. He is not on helium, but he is on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line. Zach, doesn't it feel like there is, and when I say we're going to be right back in this situation a year from now, that is not me being negative Nancy or, pessimistic Pete. I'm being realistic Rick here. The body of work would indicate that that's there's nothing to tell me otherwise, right?
How much stock do you put into the first 8 games of the season?
Here's the thing.
Because Carlie Irsay-Gordon put a lot of stock in the first 8 games of the season.
She went with an 8-week sample size as opposed to an 8-year one.
Correct.
Right?
It certainly felt like that yesterday.
The other side of it would be this, and that is the quarterbacking situation, Zach. Quarterback's the most important position in sports. And I know that Daniel Jones did play well. But then he had the injury. So there's 2 things in play here. I just feel like we are pinning things on hoping for 2 different things to come through. The first being that Daniel Jones comes back at 100%, and the second is that he comes back at 100% and is a Colt. He's a free agent. Now, I don't think people are knocking down his door, but from the people you have talked to, is there enough evidence that with this injury, he can come back and be 100% of what he was?
The quarterback conversation is so interesting when I talk to people around the league. So let's be completely objective here. Chris Ballard and the Colts deserve credit for signing Daniel Jones in the spring. I know it's hard because nobody wanted Daniel Jones. That's just not true. Like, good quarterbacks, and he's a good quarterback, not a great one. Good quarterbacks are hard to get, and they got him over the line. And by that, I mean, they got the deal done. They had missed on a couple of free agents in years past simply because at the 11th hour, another team offered a little bit more money. Ballard learned his lesson, and he got the quarterback in. This is my opinion, but I don't think I'm wrong. They knew he was going to be the guy the whole time. Shane, I don't believe, wants to have Anthony Richardson run his system anymore. So the reality is they deserve credit for bringing Daniel Jones in. He played great. Even if he played well and they were 5-3, it would have been a good signing. What really screwed this team over is Anthony Richardson's freak injury. That is absurd that this kid gets hurt stretching in the locker room before a game. I've never even heard of that. And that's where the season really spiraled, because if Jones gets hurt in week 11 or whatever it was against the Jaguars, then you go to the kid and you say, this is your chance. This is your moment. Like, you lost the starting job in August. Now prove that you were worth this pick. Prove that you were worth the investment. That's what I wanted to see. That's what Chris Ballard wanted to see. But we never got that shot because of Richardson's injury, which led to Phillip Rivers and all that. So the fault with Ballard, in my opinion, is as soon as Richardson gets hurt, you don't have a viable backup other than Riley Leonard, who gets hurt as well. So it really was a perfect storm to hurt them at the quarterback position. But to spin it forward, I don't think Jones is just going to pick up where he left off next season. Every piece of evidence we've ever seen with quarterbacks coming off this injury tells us he's not. So that's the reality. I don't think Richardson is back next year. I don't think that's a surprise.
Totally agree.
Riley Leonard is back. He played pretty well. But the reality is, if you think you're just going to roll out of bed September 5th next year for the opener or whenever it is and pick up where you left off, where Jonathan Taylor was an MVP and this team was rolling, it just doesn't work like that. And you mentioned this a minute ago. Jacksonville's coming. Like, Jacksonville's really good, and they got a really young coach. Houston has the best defense in football and has made the playoffs 3 years in a row with DeMeco Ryans. The Colts are nothing more than an afterthought in the AFC South. That's where they're at. This is a team that won the AFC South 9 of the first 13 years the division existed. Remember those days? I do. They haven't won it in 11 years. And there's no guarantee they're a force in the division next year.
Zach, like I mentioned, man, in totality, the unfortunate thing, and I hate having to say it, but the reality is, statistically speaking, this is a franchise that has been in a tunnel, except for when Peyton Manning and Andrew Luck respectively had a flashlight and a lantern. And other than that, for the most part, you found an occasional candle, and that was about it. But we shall see where it goes from here. The Athletic and Zach Kiefer will have it all covered, of course, as well as the rest of the NFL throughout the playoffs. Zach, appreciate it as always, man.
Thanks for having me, Jake.
All right, Zach Kiefer joining us on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line. When we come back, I do have a question about Indiana and notably and how it relates to Purdue basketball and Indiana football. I'm talking about the basketball program. I'll explain next.
Carrie and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Okay, I'm going to ask for everybody's cooperation with a group project. Did you ever do a group project in college, Eddie?
College, yeah.
What did Tyrese Halliburton say after he got the gold medal in the Olympics? It's like being in the group project and you didn't have to do anything and you still got the A?
I was not that person.
You were the lead guy in the group project?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to ask for everybody's participation in this project. And in addition to that, also ask for one more time, just simply an explanation and a request for or an appreciation, a gratitude for your patience. We've joked about it from time to time in terms of the helium aspect of our guests on the radio when we have them on the guest line. And this, again, goes back to, and really kind of at the fault of no one, but just as an explanation for people, because we are in a new building and a beautiful new studio, some of the fiber optics and other such things have led to they're still target shooting some areas where, for whatever reason, the bandwidth, this stuff's all beyond my intellectual capabilities, so that's why I trust the guys and gals that are doing this sort of a thing. But the bolstering of the bandwidth that leads to the clarity on the phone line, depending on how many other people are within the area, it can restrict or limit that, as I understand it, and my understanding is vague at best. But we kind of never know from one to the next when that's going to pop up, that sound effect aspect. And it is something that our engineers are working on diligently, and I think we are coming to a head on when that gets itself sorted out. But that explanation, because a couple people asked me, they're like, does he sound different? And that's the reasoning for that. So the other night, I am flipping the channels, and I land on, I knew that it was on, the Indiana-Washington game. And it is not my desire or intention to constantly sit here and tell you about how great things used to be. But I'm about to do that. Right now, Purdue is, I believe, the best team in college basketball. They're certainly one of, and I know that Arizona's unbeaten. I know that Michigan is unbeaten. I know that Iowa State's unbeaten. I know that Nebraska is unbeaten. And I know that Vanderbilt and Miami of Ohio are unbeaten. But in terms of just cohesiveness, playing style, consistency, number of ways they can beat you, Purdue's as good as anybody. And you would think that Purdue having the success that it's had as a basketball program further emphasizes for Indiana the necessity to get back to the Indiana that Indiana fans consistently think they are. And it's a hard pill to swallow. It's a hard pill to swallow to think about the fact that when I sat there before they put up banner 1987, and I sat there in the 86-87 season watching Indiana play, the 85-86 season, first game I went to at Assembly Hall, and I looked at the banners, and there was the 1953 banner, and I'm like, man, that was a long time ago. Those were like black and white photos, and video doesn't even exist from those days anymore because that was 33 years ago. And it's hard to believe that it's been that long, plus another 5 years, since Indiana's most recent banner. And I think now people are starting to realize that this is a program that is in the upper echelon, not in today, but historically. But Indiana's still a basketball school. Indiana's still, by claim, a place where the elite go. And you had the firing of Bob Knight a quarter century ago. There's not a single student at Indiana, unless they're on my plan, and they've been there for 23 years, that remembers when Bob Knight coached at Indiana or was alive when Bob Knight coached at Indiana. Hard to believe. And there have been other programs that have risen up since then. Gonzaga, prime example. Butler, obviously, 2 Final Fours. When you look, though, at Indiana and you think about the decline of the Indiana basketball program, you ask yourself, was Indiana broken as a program by Mike Davis? Was Indiana broken as a program by the shadiness and the wrongdoing of Kelvin Sampson? Was Indiana broken as a program by the bad hire of Archie Miller? Was Indiana broken as a program by the eccentricities of Tom Crean and, the rotation of roster and then some swing and misses in recruiting? Or was Indiana, if you're looking at the coach that finally broke its basketball program, is it Curt Cignetti? Because I saw that game against Washington, and I saw the statistic that 72,000 people from Indiana were at the Rose Bowl, which is fabulous and awesome and exciting. But how many of those 72,000 even knew that Indiana had a basketball game this week against Washington at Assembly Hall? There weren't 10,000 people there. And you can tell me that it's because it's winter break and students aren't on campus. You can tell me that it's because people are waiting for the Big Ten to get in full swing and they're not used to Washington as a Big Ten opponent. You can tell me that it's because they're not as familiar with the roster because you have a new coach in Darren DeVries. And I will tell you it's because the epicenter and the focus of the fan base right now is on football. And Indiana fans, for the very first time, are understanding and recognizing what most college athletic programs know, and that is that it is really fun to have a good football program and a good football team, and it's almost a bigger party and celebration. Because football, you wait all week for it, and then you tailgate, and you hang out and you grill out. And the weather's beautiful for the first 60% of the season. And you go to the game, and then you go to the bars and everything else. And for basketball, you drive down in spitting rain, 20-degree weather, hoping that Chuck Crabb afterwards, and I know it's now Jeremy Gray, doesn't say, "Attention, snow has fallen, and the Indiana State Police reminds you to please drive carefully when leaving the Assembly Hall," which was a great winter tradition. But Indiana basketball now, think about most schools. Most schools are football schools. There are only a handful that are basketball only. Duke is a basketball school. Carolina is a basketball school. But they hired Bill Belichick for football because they're trying, and that was a disaster, but, they're trying to be a football school. And Kansas is a basketball school. They had that big fat guy that, got them to the BCS, and then he was, wiping poo on towels and throwing it at guys or something, and I don't know what went on there, but there was some sort of allegation. Not saying it's factual, but that was something along those lines. Kentucky's a basketball school, but even then, they're making changes for their coaches in football. Because being a football school is cool, and it's fun, and it's lucrative. And yes, 2 years does not a culture change make. But is it possible now that you Indiana fans, even though you don't want to admit it at cocktail parties, is it possible that deep down you find that all of your emotional investment and a lot of your interest is now so hyper-focused on football that you've kind of forgotten about the basketball team? Because to have 10,000 or fewer at Assembly Hall is something I never thought I'd see. And it's odd to me, but perhaps coincidental, that it's happening at the same time of something else I would see, which is Indiana as the marquee program in college football. Stephen Holder joins us next.
is Paul. I'm the director of giddiness, and you're feeling giddy on Carlie and Company on the Fan.
I don't quit, no. I just press harder than I ever did before. Going for the dreams that I have in store in my mind. And I know that I'm making
1 o'clock hour underway in Indianapolis. How are you? For that matter, it's the 1 o'clock hour everywhere in the Eastern time zone. My name is Jake Query, Eddie Garrison, the other voice you hear on this program. We had a long meeting with a bunch of marketing people that after a while decided that the name of the program originally is Query and Company. That company consists of those of you that participate, and that includes our next guest who joins us on the Java House Peel and Pour guest line. You read his work at ESPN.com. You also see him on ESPN, which I frighteningly did one day when I was enjoying a beer after work with my buddy Jeff Hester, and we looked up, and I'm like, whoa, there's Holder on television. Stephen Holder joins us on the program now. Stephen, I'm going to begin with this. Yesterday's press conference with Carlie Irsay-Gordon, and we can decipher that if you'd like. But I think that people, and I do understand this, I think a true measure of the lack of patience that people have with the franchise comes off in sometimes a lack of understanding as to the decorum of a press conference, because I think people are under the assumption that it is some sort of duty and responsibility to go in. And yes, difficult questions or hard questions or uncomfortable questions are fair game, but I don't think that it needs to be under some sort of tenor or tone of pitchfork. And it almost feels like we, the media, were taking strays. That's part of the territory. I get it. But what did you overall think about just the measure and then the digestion of that press conference yesterday?
Okay, so this is a good topic. I think that a couple things. I will start with just the approach to press conferences generally. I think it's not the job of the media to channel anybody's anger or anything like that, right? We're there to ascertain information as best we can. And the best way to ascertain information is to act like a normal human being, and to talk to people the way you would talk to anybody, right? So that's the first thing. And demanding answers, well, there's no demanding anyway, right? It's asking questions. It's just that, right? I mean, if you don't get the answer you want, it doesn't mean that you bang your fist on the table. You try to ask it in different ways. You try different angles. All of that happened. If you watch that press conference, a lot of what was happening was Carlie trying to clarify what exactly was being asked of her, and then us on the other end of that trying to ask the question in a different manner so that it's clearer. And so it's a lot of sausage making, to be honest. And that's why I always tell people, don't watch press conferences expecting it to be some kind of like must-see TV. It's usually boring because it's not intended to be that, right? It's a conversation, it's an exchange, and it's not always that interesting. Anyway, and then so quickly, the other part of it is that I think Carlie was being intentionally vague because she does not like painting herself into a corner. And in doing so, though, what happens is when you're vague, I think she did answer a lot of the questions in a roundabout way, but the problem with that is people digest it or don't digest it properly, and all they hear is you talking in circles. You do pick up on the answers if you really break it down and go through the transcript of it, as I do as a reporter, but the average person isn't going to do that. But it's in my stories if you want to read them, knock yourself out.
Okay, ESPN.com, by the way, where you can read Stephen's stories. Stephen Holder, our guest, Java House Peel and Pour guest line. Stephen, one of the things that I was able to take away from that press conference and that I want you to tell me, and we do this regularly. For those that don't know, Stephen and I have on 4 occasions, I think. 4 occasions we have actually hung out socially outside of work circumstances, okay? And in those 4 occasions, I often ask Stephen a question, and then I'm like, all right, true or false, or am I crazy, whatever else. This is going to be one of those. I took from that press conference, Anthony Richardson's time as a Colt is done. Your thoughts?
I thought that before the press conference, and I still think that now. And so I think if I recall, her answer was something like, I'll defer to Chris Ballard, I think. But I think here's the reality on Anthony Richardson. I don't think it's going to be a Carlie Irsay decision per se. I do believe her that she will defer largely, which is what you want your owner to do for the most part. I know people hate Chris Ballard, but I mean, you also don't want owners telling people what to do when it comes to the roster, right? I don't think that's the approach either. However, when it comes to Anthony Richardson, I just go back to the 2024 season. I mean, they benched him. I mean, you know what I'm saying? They benched him in the middle of his second season, which is his first season where he was, hopefully going to start most of a season. And they benched him in the middle of that, and then proceeded after that to go get someone to take the job the following year. I mean, it's been over. You know what I mean? Like, I keep telling people this. Like, I know a lot of people out there are intrigued still by Anthony Richardson, as am I. I think there's something there still, but that's not the point. I mean, just open your eyes. Pay attention as a fan. Like, I don't know for a fact that they're going to trade him, but like, there's no momentum toward Anthony Richardson having a future here. It's very obvious. They are committed to Daniel Jones. They could not be more clear. I think the best outcome for everybody is he probably gets moved, but we'll see if it happens. But that's where this is trending.
Okay, when you look at it, Stephen, and Anthony Richardson, let's say that the Colts trade him for a fifth rounder, whatever it might be, and he's going to end up in, let's say, I'm just going to throw three teams off the top of my head here, okay? Arizona, Kansas City decides to take him as a backup, and the Raiders. I'm just going to throw those three out there. Realistically, and we do see, you and I were talking about this the other night, as a matter of fact, Alex Smith was a really serviceable and nice quarterback for Kansas City and Washington. Alex Smith was a good player. But he was measured in San Francisco on being the top player selected in the draft, and that changes expectation for a guy. When it's all said and done and Anthony Richardson goes somewhere else, and let's say he does finally get kind of a fair shake or time and there's less spotlight on him, you anticipate that he will have in totality the career trajectory and success level of what quarterback that we have seen before?
Well, I'll start before I don't have an answer right off the top of my head, but before I go on, I'll say you made a good point there, and it's this. Once you kind of move beyond that first contract or your first team, or just, whether your situation changes, what have you, your draft status doesn't matter anymore. No one will give a damn where he was drafted when he moves on to Team X. It doesn't. I'm not saying he'll succeed there. I have no idea. But all I'm saying is he won't be judged there by his draft status. He'll be judged by, we paid him, $5 million to come compete for a job. You know what I mean? So who cares where he was drafted? It wasn't their draft pick. They don't care. Those fans don't care. So that is actually a good thing for him. I think it eliminates that layer of pressure that you always have to live up to when you're the team's highly drafted quarterback. I think that's a real thing, and it is a tough thing to live up to. And he's still a young guy, and I think he struggled with that, in his first couple of years. That's a difficult thing. And in terms of your question, the comparable quarterback, this is hard because he just hasn't played enough. But I think that he could be. Trying to think of a good example. I mean, there may be, this is not a great example maybe, but I look at what Mac Jones did this year, okay?
Okay.
And he was obviously not the guy in New England, but he goes to San Francisco. He's got a good offensive coach, and he didn't have the pressure of having to be the franchise quarterback. And then he was called upon, and everybody's like, whoa, wait a minute. This guy can play. And maybe he can do something like that in time. And so Mac Jones, whenever, I don't know his contract situation off the top of my head, but let's say he signed a 1-year deal this year. Well, if he's a free agent at the end of the year, well, he's going to get now a fresh look, and people will look at him differently, right? So I do think there's an opportunity, potential like that for Anthony Richardson if, in fact, he gets moved somewhere and he ends up competing for a job or backing somebody up.
You seen those commercials, Stephen? And I think it might be for a candy where it takes the NFL players and they're like little kids, and it does their little kid voice. Do you know what I'm talking about? Eddie, help me out here. What product
I think
is
that? It's not Snickers, right? I don't know.
Eddie, let me wake up Eddie Garrison here. Hang on a second. Eddie, you with us?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. What candy is that it's like a commercial where they have two kids? Usually it's like NFL players, and it gives the kid version of them talking, and it changes their voice into kid voices.
Airheads?
Is it Airheads? That might be right. Either way, Steven, that's what you sound like right now. You okay with that?
That's what I sound like. I knew it. Yeah, I knew that's where this was going. Well, hey, listen, that's what I get for saying yes to coming on.
Okay, for that reason, as to spare you sounding like a juvenile here, because you're obviously not that. I do want to give you, before we let you go here, just the opportunity to, I guess in totality, give me this, and that is your overall thoughts yesterday on the press conference itself, the tone or the tenor of it, where you thought it did or did not explain things, and just what you would say to fans that are still restless.
Yeah, look, I would say that if you were hoping to get the answers you want, or let me put it this way, if you were hoping to come away from a press conference satisfied and with all of your questions answered, if you are someone who is not in favor of what she did, well, that was never going to happen. It was never going to happen. I would say the best thing Carlie Irsay-Gordon did yesterday was get in front of the microphone. Everything else that happened, I'm not saying it's inconsequential, but I think it matters less. And here's why. Because I think the accountability of showing up and taking the questions, even if you don't like the answers, the accountability of getting there and getting in front of that firing squad, that is important. And she did do that. And I give her a lot of credit because it's very clear watching her, like it's not her favorite thing in the world, right? This is not the thing that she wakes up in the morning hoping to do. I have never gotten a call from Carlie Irsay and have her say, hey, I got a few things to tell you, and this is on the record. Jim Irsay did that all the time, right? So that's never going to happen with Carlie, at least not the Carlie that I know, not currently. So you have to understand the context of who you're dealing with. And then the other thing I would say is this. I get the anger. I mean, it is a long time. I have heard from people around the league, people who work in the league, asking me similar questions like, what the hell is going on over there? But I would say this. I'll give her this. I think it took more courage. This is not a gold star. I'm just pointing this out. I think it took more courage to do what they did as opposed to firing them, because that was the thing everybody wanted. They actually are taking a gamble and saying, we think the guy who hasn't been good enough is going to figure this out, and the quarterback who's hurt is going to find his way back, and the coach we're not sure about, we think he's the guy. That's what they're saying. So you got to have a lot of gumption to be able to say all of those things and stand on business and go forward with it. And that's what they're doing. So we will see. Time will tell, and the arbiter will be next year's record.
Okay, speaking of gumption, can I just get you to say this on the way out, Stephen? You might need to write it down. Simply say, I'm Stephen Holder. I don't like Eddie's gummies, but I do love my gummy bears. Can we just get you to say that?
Is this going to be a weekly thing, by the way?
Hopefully not.
I'm Stephen Holder. I don't like Eddie's gummies, but I like my gummies. Did I get that right?
No. I'm Stephen Holder. I don't like Eddie's gummies, but I do love my gummy bears.
Okay. I'm Stephen Holder. I don't like Eddie's gummies, but I do like my gummy bears. I have no idea what the point of this is, but I think it's just for Jake's entertainment, honestly. But I'm glad to serve.
All right, listen, what I'm doing here is I'm trying to make chicken salad out of proverbial chicken wire on the internet. Stephen, we appreciate it as always, man. Stephen Holder from ESPN.com. We are scheduled to have Scott Agnes later in the program, but we might have to go to an alternate source to see whether or not we can get Scott on the show. I agree with what Stephen said, and the fact that yesterday, I'm aware of it. the press conference. It is unfair to say that we anticipated or needed some sort of definitive anger out of Carlie Irsay-Gordon. And the reality is a couple of things. Number one, we have not seen her in that setting before. We don't know what her thought process is. What we know is that she clearly is an owner that has interest in what goes on as to how the sausage is made, to use the quote from her father. Because Jim Irsay was one that, if you remember, what did he say? I know how the sausage is made, when he was talking about the inner workings of a football team. And Jim Irsay is one that started out in the towel room. Frankly, he was around the NFL from the time that he was a kid with his father. He played collegiately. He played the game of football at SMU. Carlie Irsay-Gordon, for those that don't know her background, she was born in Dallas because her father was at SMU at the time of her birth. She was either 3 or 4 years old, but it was in the year of her turning 4 that the Colts moved to Indianapolis. And so she then moved to Indianapolis. She went to Park Tudor. She and her sister spent a lot of time at Hillcrest Country Club, running the pool, running around like any kid, my point being. And then in college, went away, very intelligent, was working on a master's in psychology, didn't complete that degree, but was taking classes towards a master's in psychology, and then came back and began working for the family business. And the family business happened to be the Indianapolis Colts. And in that capacity, I think that people of a great drive and of a great intelligence want to make sure that they know all aspects of the business. And, I'll give you a good example. I'll never forget, I have a cousin who owns a business, an engineering company. His father started it. And my cousin went to Purdue. And when he got out of Purdue, the natural thought would be that he would get out of school and immediately go work for my uncle's company that has a building named for it on the Purdue campus. Okay? And my cousin, upon graduating from Purdue, moved to San Jose, California. And a couple of years after that, I was working at the cigar store. I didn't have much money, but I'm like, I've got a cousin that lives in the Bay Area. A place to stay. If I can get a discount flight out to the Bay Area, I've never been to San Francisco and San Jose. I'd like to go out and see it. So I went out to go visit my cousin. And all I knew was that he had a degree from Purdue and that his dad owned a big-time engineering company in Indianapolis, and that my cousin was now working for an engineering company in San Jose. Purdue, a leading engineering school. So I assumed that when I got there that I was going to go into his office and see, and I'd see his ties hanging in the closet. And when I got to his place in San Jose, I walked in, and the first thing that I noticed was a dirt-covered pair of construction boots sitting on the mat. And I'm like, you doing yard work or what? And he's like, no, I wear those to work, man. He's like, listen, in the morning, you're welcome to take my car and go to San Francisco, whatever, but I got to get up at 5. I got to be at work at 6:30. The construction site. A construction site? What are you talking about? And he had his pencil and his hard hat and his combat, his work boots and the whole deal. Because his dad said, look, you're not just going to come work for the family business. You've got to learn the ground level of the family business. And I always greatly admired that. He went out and worked for years doing that and worked at every aspect of a business and a company before then eventually going and working for his dad's company, where, again, He did not. He started outside the boardroom and again had to work his way up, but he now had the foundation of all of those things. In the case of Carlie Irsay-Gordon, is it unorthodox to see her on the sidelines wearing the headset? Yes. It's unusual. We haven't seen that before. And there's probably also a filter by which we unfairly critique that because we're also not used to seeing a female owner. You see them in movies. You saw it with the Rams, ironically, the franchise that was traded with her grandfather in ownership when Carol Rosenblum had the franchise of the Colts, and they swapped franchises, and then eventually Georgia Frontier had the Rams. And I lived in St. Louis when Georgia Frontier was the owner of the Rams before the Cronkies took over. And she was critiqued by people as being this flamboyant, Lovey Howell type character on the sidelines that was more worried about the glitz and glamour than winning an NFL Super Bowl. And guess what? They won the Super Bowl. And she bought many Lombardis for everybody on the staff and huge rings and was as generous as could be. And then suddenly, because they won, she was a great owner. And in the case of Carlie Irsay-Gordon, the reality is, whether we want to admit it or not subconsciously, I do think that there's a different level in the way that we digest or interpret or assume her grasp and her understanding of running a franchise. Part of that is gender associated. More of that is just age associated. Owners are supposed to be 70-year-old guys that have seen it all, or women that have seen it all. And so there was a lot of expectation, be it fair or not, about what people wanted to or expected to hear yesterday. And at the very least, what they wanted and expected to hear was certainty, conviction, and strength of I'm in charge now. And this is unacceptable to me. Now, I have made the decision to bring back Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen. And the reason why is because when I have been evaluating and assessing where we go from here, it is my belief that there is enough in the foundation that is the stronger alternative for now than to make a change at this point, given the roster that we have. However, I have told Chris and Shane, and they are emphatically under the understanding that this needs to turn around, and this is the most important year that there can be. To say and sit up there and say, there's an urgency now? There's an urgency now? What? What do you mean there's an urgency now? The urgency just began? When I bought my season tickets 10 years ago, I would have liked to have known that then. I would have liked to have known when I bought season tickets in 2018. Don't worry, in the 2026 season, there's an urgency that begins then. That's why people are PO'd. That's why people are disappointed. That's why people are frustrated, and I understand all of it. It was her first time to really show leadership in front of the fans, and I think fans felt like she fell short in that regard. And that's an unfair critique, perhaps, because this is new to her. I get it. But in terms of the wearing the headsets and the unorthodox things, I think it goes back to the reality is this. The reality is that she is a young woman that wanted to blaze her own path, one would assume, and went about from an education and an entrepreneurial, I can't even say that word, but from a business standpoint, a direction away from the game of football because she probably was under the understanding or the assumption that football was going to be like the second career for her because she was not going to be thrust into this limelight until late into her 50s or early 60s. And unfortunately, her father was ill for a while there and then passed. And so, yes, she did and was within the franchise at probably an earlier time than even she expected. But I don't think that she anticipated that the now would be there. But for her to say, like, the urgency, now there's an urgency, again, just something that comes over time with immediate training. But the bottom line is this. The bottom line is it's a franchise that's stuck in mediocrity. It's a franchise that is being led by somebody that doesn't give them a clear path to lead you to believe that that mediocrity is going to change. And it's a franchise that once again, as we talk about proactive versus reactive, appears to be slow on reaction with no proactiveness. And in addition to that, seemingly it is a franchise that did not have a plan B. And the reason they're in the situation they're in now is because more often than not, they either don't have a plan B or the plan B they come up with is the wrong one. And that's the disappointment of it. And that's why people are upset. And yesterday going into it, I was simply telling you what I was assuming was her reasoning for bringing back Steichen and Ballard. And where I think people are additionally upset is I don't think they have any more clear understanding of that reasoning than they did going into the press conference.
Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
It's a great song. Great song. Jake Query here along with Eddie Garrison, Query & Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. Thanks to Cluster Truck for lunch once again. Eddie, I realize, and you kind of go with typically you go with the Korean barbecue, right?
The Korean barbecue salmon or the barbecue smoked pork mac and cheese.
And which did you go with this time?
I went with the mac and cheese.
And they brought us some fabulous cookies, right?
I also do the barbecue chicken strips as well from time to time because those are so good. Reese's peanut butter cup cookies.
Cluster Truck, by the way, is the beauty of it. Not only are they like really quick with getting the food to you, but they don't start making it till you order it. So you order it, it goes right to a local kitchen, made right there, and then on its way to you. People like when I do that sound effect, which I find odd. I would like to point out that one of our engineers in the building, Cam, is a diehard Ohio State fan, and this guy, you want to talk about, having himself a pair. He is dressed completely. Is there an Ohio State pep rally today of which I'm unfamiliar? He's decked out completely in his Ohio State Buckeye gear. Cam, are you headed to something? Is it basketball season? What are we doing here? What am I missing? Are you wearing the snow hat?
No basketball season, no nothing.
I figured it out. You're wearing the snow hat because the playoffs are still ongoing and Ohio State's left out in the cold, right? Is that what it is?
Sure, yeah, we'll go with that one.
Okay, fair enough. The Indiana-Oregon matchup, yes. It is going to be tough for Indiana to beat Oregon because it's always difficult to beat a team twice. And yes, Curt Cignetti has said that these two teams have morphed into completely different teams from what they were at the beginning of the year. I understand all of that. And I didn't think, a year ago, you all heard it, myself included. I said it. Well, that Indiana story was pretty nice. I mean, that was neat the way that they had that great year and that Curt Cignetti's something, but then they went in against Notre Dame and he got a little bit conservative, and Notre Dame, they could have beaten them 50-3. Indiana didn't really belong. It was a cool story, but they kind of got lucky. And those two games they played against Notre Dame and Ohio State, they got beaten both. So next year's going to be, they got to go to Oregon. They got to go to Penn State. They'll probably lose 3 games. And I didn't think they'd lose 3, but I certainly thought Oregon, for example, was going to be a tough one. And they go and they play Oregon and they win in Eugene. And then they turn around against Iowa and they snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. And they go to Happy Valley where Penn State's season had completely gone the way of the Hindenburg, and they need that play, that drive at the end from Mendoza to Omar Cooper. And then they go in against Ohio State. And I think Ohio State is fantastic. And I'm thinking to myself, I have a worry here that Ohio State's going to turn up the wick and Indiana's going to find out that Ohio State is a 17-point better team than Indiana. And they go out in that game and you realize, gosh, Indiana's front four is nasty. And Indiana's quarterback is better than Ohio State's. Ohio State's got the 3 best receivers on the field, but they're not throwing to them. And Ohio State's trying to run the football, and Indiana's just making play after play. And it was at that time, and yes, I was late to the party. The invitation said 7 p.m., and I walked in the door at 8:30. I was late to the party in recognizing and fully being convinced of what this Indiana team has done and who they are. Because, and it's very easy to get caught up in, and it's very easy to get swept away by recruiting rankings and pregame rankings and point spreads and all of that. But it doesn't matter that Elijah Surratt was unranked coming out of high school and went to James Madison. It doesn't matter that Aiden Fisher, basically the same. It doesn't matter that Charlie Becker was like the 499th recruit in the country or whatever and was the 38th best prospect in the state of Tennessee. None of that matters. What matters is what happens once they get to Indiana and the way that they've been developed. And you don't win games on the ranking that you had coming out of high school. If you did, Romeo Langford would have been winning Big Ten titles, and he was Romeo Langford, when he announced that he was going to Indiana, had fat guys in sweatpants wrapped around the high school waiting for his autograph, and his minister up there speaking for 30 minutes, and his principal speaking, and his dad walking around with an arm sleeve and whatever else, and everybody going gaga because it was a slam dunk that he was going to be the greatest player ever to play at Indiana because he was a number 2 recruit and a 5-star. And A.J. Guyton, at the time that he announced that he was going to Indiana out of Peoria, like 2 people and his mailman knew about it. And Braden Smith, people were like, yeah, Purdue got Braden Smith, great, whatever, nice player. And I know he was a Mr. Basketball, but he's a smaller guy, undersized, okay. It's about development. It's about what you become and who you are as a college player. So my long-winded, circuitous route is to say this. I am past the point of doubting Indiana. And I'm late to the party, man. And I'm the first to admit it. Mock me, ridicule me, laugh at me, tell me I'm wrong all you want. Fine, I'll take it. Not to say that I thought they were going to lose every game that they've won. But what I'm saying is I am late to the party of simply saying, you are a fool. If you want to say that Indiana is going to struggle against Oregon because Oregon has a precise passing game that is quick release and fast, fine. If you want to say that Oregon has an advantage because they have more speed at critical positions, fine. If you want to say that Oregon has advantage over Indiana because psychologically it's difficult to beat a team twice, have at. But if you want to say that Indiana is not going to win this game because they're Indiana and Oregon's been there before, then I got news for you. I got basement land in Florida I'd love to sell you. You have to be past the point of doubting this Indiana team. You have to. And you have to buy into the fact that there is just something about this season with Indiana and Curt Cignetti of preparation. And I know that I've been saying this, and I'm going to say it. You're going to hear me say it all week. We've been talking about 2 football teams on this radio station and on this show for the last month. One of which is where they are now because they're always prepared for what's around the corner, and the other of which is in the situation they're in because they're always hit by surprises when no one else is shocked. And for the Colts standpoint, I go back again to the Ed Norton analogy. The whole time, you're thinking it's the sweet, innocent kid that occasionally loses time. And then the bad side comes out. But at what point are we going to say that this franchise actually might be the bad Ed Norton? And that it was all a ruse to make you think that there's a sweet, lovable innocence there? And from the IU standpoint, we have thought forever that it's been nothing but a punchline. And now, guess what? They're the punchers. And get used to it. Because so long as Curt Cignetti is there, they have preparation, they have understanding of task, and they are prepared for what's happening next. And I don't know that last year they were, to be honest with you. I do think that he erred in the way that he conducted himself in the pregame before the Notre Dame game, if we're being fair. I thought that he erred in going on College game day and having that bravado. I think that I truly think this. I think Cignetti went on that College game day set in South Bend and saw McAfee on the stage and thought he was still in the mantra or the character of the Pat McAfee show and went with that level of, bravado. And that's when Saban was like, hey man, you shouldn't be saying these things right now. The game's an hour and a half from kickoff. And, he was like, well, we just go out there and we just beat people's butt, and all that. I thought he erred there. And I think he miscalculated and mistimed the moment. And they went out and Notre Dame handled him pretty easily. But I think he learned from that and has not hit a wrong note since. And yes, he is a coach of elite level record, but like anybody else, you learn through your errors. And I think he erred there. And I don't know what other errors now there are to amend for, because what they've done in the transfer portal, what they did to Ohio State, what they did to Oregon, what they did to Alabama. Indiana has arguably the three most impressive wins of the college football season. They do. I'd also like to know this, and I did this yesterday around this time. This time yesterday, we were anticipating the press conference for the Colts. We've now seen it. We've now had time to ingest and then digest it. And I feel like sometimes I maybe even unfairly speak for all of you. Now, you're not going to sound like Mickey Mouse, I don't think. You're not going to sound like you're in the Gummy Bear commercial, I don't think. But if you're willing to run that risk, I'd like to know what you thought about yesterday's presser so that I'm not speaking for you. The telephone number is 239-1070. You can also text me, either at the station, text 239-1070 to the show, or at my number, which is 523-9288. 523-9288. Couple of show announcements and those comments from you next.
to Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Eddie, you a Billy Joel guy?
You know, I like some of his hits. This is one of them.
239-1070 is the telephone number. I would like to know people's thoughts yesterday. I do think that, selfishly, I guess in the sake of fairness or transparency, I had several people that thought that I was not hard enough on the Colts yesterday. And as I mentioned off the top of the show, and I'll mention it again, just as an explanation, yesterday at 2:20-ish, we were under the assumption that the press conference for the CEO and owner of the Colts would take place at 2:30. So we came back, and I'm looking, and I'm going to, and listen, what I'm about to say, I love. I love this. I'm not saying this as a woe is me thing at all. I enjoy it, and it is truthfully a compliment or kind of almost an adrenaline rush to be the one that has the responsibility of what I'm about to say. But I know that we're waiting on this press conference to take place, and so I know that I've got to fill a little bit of time until tap dance, as we call it in the business, till the press conference starts. And I'm looking at it, and I'm like, man, what is going on? Like, there's we're getting no indication on when this is actually going to happen. So leading up to it, knowing that I'm going to throw to it at any minute, I'm like, okay, let me just introduce what it is that we're about to hear from. And so in that capacity, even though I had said yesterday at the beginning of the show, I said, I will spell this out from both sides. What I think the Colts should do, and then in addition to that, I will tell you what I think the Colts' line of thinking is, because we now know that Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen are coming back. That's all we knew, was that they're coming back. We didn't know if they'd been signed to a longer term. We didn't know if they were told you're on the control chair. We didn't know if they were being told you're in the last year of your contract and then that's it. We had no idea. We had assumption that it was always, kumbaya, but we didn't know. So I came on and just said, what we know is that Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen will return as the general manager and coach of the Indianapolis Colts, respectively. And then I said, I think I've shared my thought on what they should have done, which is I thought they needed to change the general manager. Followed that up with, but this would be my assumed reason that will be explained perhaps on why they decided to go in this direction. And one of the things that I pointed out was the possibility that they didn't have a choice about making a change at this time because there are business or operational things that need to be executed that took away from the time necessary to get into the nuances of the on-field football aspect of it. And that would be unfortunate, and that would be, to an extent, not something, inexcusable is the wrong word, maybe understandable, but frustrating. And I was simply laying out that possible hypothesis, still looking at the clock like, are we doing this press conference or not, having no idea where we were going. And several people thought that I was not hard enough on the Colts at that time. Now that we heard the press conference, and now that we finally went to it, I think everybody knows where I stand on it. This from my text messages. Jake, my opinion about Carlie Irsay, plain and simple. She knows how an NFL organization works, but she does not know how winning football decisions work. She's like that new fantasy football team owner in a league full of grizzled veterans. That from David on the east side. Jake, I have to believe the decision to retain Chris Ballard was due to looking at 8 games of an easy schedule instead of 8 years of mediocrity. The Colts only won 2 games all year against teams with winning records this year. And of those 2 wins came as a gift from the Broncos on a penalty after the Colts had lost due to Shane's decision to run out the clock and try a 60-yard field goal. The Colts remain a mediocre team with a mediocre general manager. Keep in mind, of the 6 games they won, And that 8-game stretch, of those games, how many of them even have their head coach or their general manager back? Or both? Right? They got fat off bad teams. Yes, Eddie.
We have a new letter.
What's that?
We have a new letter from Colts ownership to its fans.
Oh, really?
Yes. And it's 2 screenshots worthy.
Okay. Do you happen to have, by chance, the breaking news sounder? This just in from the Indianapolis Colts. I will read it right before us. Dear Colts fans, like you're without a doubt frustrated with the final results. Oh, sorry, I already screwed up the reading of this. Let me go to the higher image, Eddie. This from the Indianapolis Colts, a letter from ownership. Dear Colts fans, like you, we're without a doubt frustrated with the final results of the season. Until we win consistently, claim the division, and reach the playoffs, we're not meeting the high standard we all expect of our team. At the same time, there were many moments in 2025 that led us to believe we can achieve sustained success. That's why we're confident about the blueprint Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen created last year, and why we're confident they can build on the progress we saw early on this past season. Last offseason, our dad challenged our entire organization to fix the issues preventing us from reaching the playoffs. Chris and his team responded by taking a different approach to building the roster. We were aggressive in free agency. We acquired a quarterback who helped lead our offense to a historic start. We found talent in the draft, and we traded for a premier cornerback. That is page 1 of 2. It goes on to say, the philosophy paid immediate dividends, but our fast start to the season makes missing the playoffs sting even more. It also gave us a look at what's possible when we have the right components in place. Replicating that success and extending it throughout the season and into the playoffs will be our goal. We know many fans want change now, and we hear, respect, and understand the frustration. But make no mistake, the urgency to succeed and win has never been higher, and we believe we can compete for the division and a playoff berth next season and into the future. In the meantime, thank you for supporting the Horseshoe through what has been a challenging year on and off the field. We wish you all a wonderful and prosperous 2026. Sincerely, Carlie Irsay-Gordon, Casey Foyt, and Kalen Jackson, end quote. Now, I get it. But I don't think that people are going to feel confident in that. Because that is to say that you are assessing the totality of the Chris Ballard era based on changes from the first 10 games. And you appear to be omitting that of the rest of the time. 70, 78, and 1. And we are all just gerbils spinning on the same treadmill. That's what it feels like. We're just on that wheel. And I am confident in saying, I hope I'm wrong. I absolutely hope I'm wrong. But I'm confident in saying that we are going to be having this same conversation next year. Because as I said yesterday, to most people by this time, and maybe we've got like 2 more days left of saying it, but when you see people right now this week for the first time, you say, Happy New Year. But you don't on West 56th. Because it ain't a Happy New Year. There is no New Year. Because it's the same as last. And it's the same as the year before that. And the same as the year before that. And the same as the year before that. And you had the opportunity to measure and judge and critique over a 149-game stretch. And you opted for 10. And you can say to me till the cows come home that the injuries were the culprit. But the biggest injury to the Colts was at the quarterback position, and they have mentioned the quarterback in that statement. They mentioned Sauce Gardner indirectly, but outside of that, the one change that's made in that statement was quarterback. We got a quarterback that did great things. A quarterback now who's coming off of a ruptured Achilles that isn't signed for next year. You have two different variables in play that you're hoping fall into place so that you can sustain and pick up where you left off. And where you left off was beating a bunch of really bad teams, and where you left off was going into a situation where, yes, you were 8-2, but you hadn't played the meat of your schedule yet. You hadn't played a team that blitzed the hell out of you and completely confused your quarterback at that point, and all of a sudden the turnovers started to creep themselves back up. You hadn't done any of those things just yet. And you can sit here and say that it came down to the fact that we no longer had that quarterback. But it's your general manager, not me, not Eddie Garrison, not JMV, not Kevin Bowen, not James Boyd, not Jeff Rickard, nobody else in this town. It's the general manager who has said it comes down to being about more than one person. If it's about more than one person, and he said that when Andrew Luck was on the roster, don't think our success is directly linked to Andrew Luck because it's about more than that on the roster. And he said last year when everybody was asking questions about Anthony Richardson, guys, you know, we got other guys on this roster, and then the nervous laughter, right? And the blink of the eyes. He said that. So you can't turn around and tell me that your utter failure, disappointment, and leaving everybody thirsting for more is based on the fact that one player went down. It's a hogwash excuse. It's a BS excuse. And people in this town have heard way too much, way too long of the same story over and over and over. And the only thing that's different from one year to the next is the excuse. What's your excuse going to be next year? That's how people feel.
Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
I hate saying this, but it seems to me the only reason you would send that press release or that letter to fans out today is if you know that yesterday's press conference didn't take. You basically said all that yesterday. Unless it was just, hey, let's do this in summary. But it actually, I guess I can say this word because Carlie Irsay-Gordon used it in the press conference. It makes me, I don't think you can say by FCC rule that you can't say this blanks you off. But it does make me, I'll say, peeved. I think it's an insult. I think it's an insult to people who pay their hard-earned money. All that people want when you pay the money that people pay for tickets, when you invest the emotions that you invest in a football team, and more so, yes, are the Colts held to a higher standard? Yes. You know why? They play, and at the time of its development, in the most publicly subsidized building in the United States. And when you have that sort of a tax windfall that comes your way, then yes. And I know people can tell me till the cows come home that, the money comes from a different revenue source or the taxes. Well, no, Jake, you're a moron because the taxes that go into, the hospitality taxes are different than the taxes that pay for roads and schools. I get it. But when you have finances that are there or the ability to generate them in certain areas, and you have certain areas of this city that are crumbling before your eyes, then all people expect and all people want is that you're giving your best effort and doing what is the absolute best to give people return on their investment. And when you invest money in something, you expect the money to grow. When you check your 401k, after 9 years, you expect the balance to be higher than it was than where you started. And for the most part, for the last 9 years, it's been crap. A playoff win, a playoff game at home, and just a bunch of crap. And the same sorry-ass excuse every year. Sorry. It's going to fall flat with people. It's going to get people peeved. It's going to get people frustrated and upset. And somebody asked me, well, Jake, if Ballard is 78-1, why are people upset by that? And they're not upset that the Pacers are 6-30. And it is true. I've been out to Pacer games, and I was I couldn't believe it last week. I looked up, and I'm like, this place is like packed. They're playing San Antonio. Wemby probably has a lot to do with that. But I do think it's because the Pacers have exhibited two things. Not always. Trust me. There were pitchforks out after the brawl, and you got guys like Tremaine Folks and Britton Johnson out there playing, and there were times where they were just sitting there sinking in the quicksand for years. Troy Murphy and Mike Dunleavy and trying to make things work. Trust me, there was plenty of frustration over that franchise. But of late, in the recent installment of it, a half away from winning the NBA title, and in addition to that, you have a franchise that when it came down to it and they were stuck in mediocrity, they were not afraid. They were not afraid to make a change and go out and get Halliburton and trade Sabonis and rock the apple cart. They weren't afraid to do it. They didn't sit around and just keep rehashing the same thing over and over and then saying the same sorry excuse. Now, as it stands right now at 6-30, they are getting the benefit of the doubt because they earned that benefit of the doubt because they had said initially, here's what we're doing. And now they sit at 6-30, and yeah, it sucks. It does, but at least there's tangible evidence for it because Halliburton's out and Toppin's out and Neesmith was out for a long time and Nimhard was out for a long time and McConnell's been out and you're starting center left. But I don't see the Pacers sitting around saying over and over, well, we're assessing this because – no, they know the situation. Now, if next year they're 6-30 again and they say, well, it's because we had guys get hurt, then people are going to be upset about it. People aren't upset because the Colts just went on a 7-game skid to close out the year. People are upset because they did the same thing they've been doing for 9 years, and now they're trying to get fans to believe that they're doing it a different way. Scott Agnes joins us now, Java House Peel and Pour Guest Line. Scott, I'll begin with this. Tony Bradley yesterday, we found out, waived by the Pacers. Did that surprise you?
It did not, Jake, because the upcoming deadline, he'd have to be waived by tomorrow or else his contract is guaranteed for the rest of the season. Before this move, Jake, they had no available roster spots, not a ton of cash to work with. This gives them greater flexibility should the front office choose to do something here at the trade deadline over the next month.
Okay, when you talk about that move itself, and I know we're talking about a guy in Tony Bradley that, was never, although he did get minutes for them in the playoffs, I think they liked his rebounding. He was not a mainline player. I get that. But when you say that it didn't surprise you because the deadline was coming up anyway, this is because they are over where? In other words, what was the reason why they had to make room?
They do not necessarily, but it gives you – remember last year they decided to make some trades, and ultimately they had to guarantee, I think, James – they had already guaranteed James Wiseman's contract. Then they had to move on from that. Basically, it's a situation here where – one, you're not sure if Tony Bradley's for sure a part of your rotation anyway. Right now he's kind of had to be because of injuries and not having a stable position there at center spot. But more to the point here is it allows you to figure out what you want to do at the trade deadline without locking in his contract. You can still bring him back later in the year. You could bring him back as soon as he clears waivers. So I think this is an opportune move for a guy that is down your depth chart, who's not completely healthy with a fracture to the tip of his right thumb. And right now, Pacers have to do everything to position themselves to potentially make moves, in my opinion.
Okay, let me ask you this. The situation with Ben Mathurin, thumb injury, and I'm not sure how long he's going to be out, but does this impact the trade value of Ben Mathurin? Because I am convinced, Scott, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I'm convinced the Pacers are going to try to move him. Tell me I'm wrong.
No, I don't think you're necessarily wrong here because they have to make a decision. It would be opportunistic for them to make a decision now if they have clarity on what they want to do. Meaning, are they going to be willing to pay him this summer? Now, he is a restricted free agent, which does allow the Pacers to match any other offer that is out there. Keep that in mind. Yet at the same time, do the Pacers view him part of the future, and does he fit in well? And is he happy? Does he want to continue here? They have to factor all those decisions in because what you don't want to do is lose him, a lottery pick that you don't get many shots at for nothing. And if you choose not to match a deal this summer and you don't work with a partner that's willing to do a sign and trade like Milwaukee and the Pacers did for Malcolm Brogdon years ago, then you risk putting yourself in that spot, much like Miles Turner this summer. Now, he was an unrestricted free agent, but the Pacers got nothing for him in free agency.
Do you believe the Pacers see – I'm going to give you a multiple choice here, Scott, A, B, and C. Scott Agnes, my guest, Fieldhouse Files, where you read his work, Java House, Peel and Pour Guest Line, where he is. So the replacement for Miles Turner, and you look at what an important piece he was to the Pacers offense during the NBA Finals and their playoff run. The Finals, perhaps you could say that it was not there, and that's what hurt them. But you get my point. Do you believe that the Pacers see Miles Turner's replacement as A, currently on the roster, B, someone they will acquire with the high pick that they're going to have, or C, someone they acquire based on trade for Ben Mathurin?
I think it would – with Ben Mathurin. I thought you were going to say in the draft.
No, draft. So option A is on the roster. B is they use the draft pick to draft the center. C is they trade Mathurin straight up for a center replacement.
Gotcha. I would say C's the one that stands out to me. And obviously it would make sense because you would have a lot of value with Matherin for sure. But I think a most likely area where they would upgrade that position for a ready-made team going into next year, right, Jake? That's what we have to assume. Coming off last year, you get Halliburton back after this Achilles injury that he's now 26 removed from. To me, you need an upgrade that's ready to go now versus if you're drafting on, it might take 3 or 4 years. So I'm absolutely doing it via trade.
I would say, because I have thought this, and I will until the draft, until we know, I'm convinced of this, Scott. I think the game plan, now, plans and execution of plans are two different things. Takes two to tango, right? But I'm under the assumption that the Pacers are looking at it saying, we are going to flip Benedict Mathurin at the trade deadline for an athletic, shot-blocking, running big. And then in the draft, we will use our selection, presumably a top 5 pick, for a wing that comes off the bench for us, a la the role last year of Benedict Mathurin. And then you bring back Toppin, Neesmith, Nembhard, Halliburton, and you feel like you are as close to as you can be to replicating running back what got you to the finals. You agree?
I think that seems reasonable. Yeah, for sure. The challenge is, obviously, with the center spot and with Matherin, you have to, if you're trying to do that all in one, you have to ideally make sure, find that big and then see if that team would covet and have the money to make it work with Matherin in particular, which certainly complicates things. Although, right now, Matherin coming off his rookie deal, much more affordable, but makes you wonder, the player you're probably going to acquire is getting paid much more than that right now. So that complicates a little bit if you focus on the Matherin aspect.
Now, do you think Matherin has trade value?
I do, absolutely. When healthy, he's a guy that can get you 20 points per game. He's a guy that gets to the free throw line. He showed improvement, in my opinion, defensively this season, where I think the first year he just didn't even take an interest in it because probably he's never had to, being the best guy on his team. Now it seems like he's doing what the coaching staff has been instructed to him, defensively and even offensively, in talking about maybe attacking and setting up a teammate for the better shot, those sorts of things. What I'm most interested in, Jake, here, is what it's going to cost the team, because I would suggest it's probably much more affordable, and probably under $30 million would be my guess going into this free agency. But if you're the player, you're trying to max out all you can get. You're wanting a max type level deal, ideally going into your first shot at free agency here. And so that's also then where the other side, where Matherin and his representative have to have an understanding of what's the Pacers at. And can they even afford you? Are they willing to go into the tax to then afford you? So there's a lot of elements in play here beyond just, is he healthy? What are you willing to continue on with him? Do you want to? Can you make it work with your current financial situation? We talked about the luxury tax with Miles. That will come into play with Matherin.
Scott, you're like a pina colada. You ever drink a pina colada?
I have, yes.
I like a pina colada, right? Some people, like, you order a pina colada, they look at you funny. But if you're in Florida, you're on the beach, the elements are. A pina colada is great, right? It's refreshing, tastes good. I love that coconut taste. It feels to me like Ben Matherin is rum. If you're making a pina colada, it's an incredibly important ingredient, and everybody likes rum. Who doesn't like rum? Rum's great. But the Pacers' offense is an old-fashioned. And an old-fashioned doesn't require rum. But if the old-fashioned is out and you got to go to the pina colada, fine. You're glad you have the rum around. But it's not, in other words, his style of play to me and where he benefits you is an ingredient in a cocktail that is different than the priority cocktail of the Pacers. Is that overstating it?
No, I think that's really good. I was going in a different direction in that I only really crave a pina colada when you're on the beach down in Florida. And so if you're in the right setting with the right situation, you crave that. I think both work just fine there. Yeah, I think that's a situation and a consideration I think this team has had to have since they've drafted him. And because how much do you force a player to fit within your flow, yet at the same time you want to maximize their playing style and maximize their game and let them be them? Now, I think part of that has to be earned. certainly. And Matherin hadn't made it an all-star appearance. He's done a Rising Stars, but that's more of a status that you reach when you're an all-NBA, all-star type talent. He's not there, certainly not yet. And so these are all discussions that front office has to be having here, led by, I think, Rick Carlisle, who's the one deciding when and how much to play him. And this season was pivotal here, or is pivotal, because he has that starting role. And that's been one of the big conversations. Can he do it in the starting lineup? Does he have to come off the bench? Can he replicate the same thing like he's done off the bench? And so at least they're getting more answers there. But this turf toe, let's be honest here, this is going to bother him, I believe, the rest of the season. It's something you need to take months off. We saw Miles Turner deal with something similar, Jake, and it was a time when the Pacers were rebuilding, so he didn't play the final month and a half of the season, whatever that was, 3 years ago. And then this right thumb thing, this is something he's been dealing with for about a month, at least to my knowledge. And so that's in large part why his numbers are down. And so I do appreciate in this down year that they are giving him now time to get healthy, because that's got to be the number one priority here in a retooling year.
Scott, did you go to the Rose Bowl?
I did, yes.
Thoughts, impressions? I know the weather wasn't great, but it cleared up at least by the time, you've been to Pasadena before, I'm sure. But I saw 72,000 were there, which would mean 80% Indiana fans. Does that seem like a high number, or does that seem accurate?
I thought I saw them announce 90,000.
No. 72,000 from Indiana.
Oh, yeah, that's probably right. I've said all along about 75%, roughly.
Okay.
So that's right there. It was hard to tell, except what really helped, I will say, is in the fourth quarter when those Alabama fans started leaving. And then, I had a friend that's worked those games for many years now, and she was like, yeah, our producers were saying we've never seen this many fans stay for the post-game ceremony. None of the IU fans left at all.
Well, Indiana fans didn't know that you're supposed to leave before the postgame because they've never been involved in that before, right? There's no dress rehearsal, so they're like, yeah, stick around. Okay, let me ask you this. Couple of things. Number one, Alabama fans, cool, not cool?
Not around. I had no interaction with Alabama fans, so I have no opinion. Yeah, I will say walking around downtown L.A. Beforehand and then Pasadena, both on the day after as well, because made a point to get back up there. I learned all this here in the last week, but they have this thing called Float Fest, and all the floats are stationary, but they're on display. So if you didn't see them on the there for the parade, you can go and see them the next day. I had no interaction with Alabama fans. That's how dominant it was, as we all predicted going into this weekend for IU fans.
Okay, secondly, this was the first or repeated or return trip to the Rose Bowl for you. And I don't mean the bowl game, I mean the stadium.
First time to Pasadena, first time to the Rose Bowl.
Okay, my experience at the Rose Bowl, and I talked about this on the radio, so I want you to basically tell me if I'm off my rocker and gave people bad advice. I said it's a fabulous venue, it's historic, it's beautiful, it's iconic, all of that. It's terribly uncomfortable.
Comfortable in terms of what? Seats?
Like the seats are made for everybody to be 5'9" and 105 pounds.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that, although I will say if you're not in the end zone, you have chair back seats, which I didn't realize here till leading into it. I thought it was kind of like Notre Dame, where it was just flat and you better take a cushion. Yeah, it has that old school feel with smaller dimensions. To me, and this is known going into it, is the biggest issue is getting in, but especially getting out, Jake.
Right.
We interacted with this old couple. I mean, must have been 80 years old. And this was a day after, but they were in line along with all of us for the shuttle, where they heard it's going to be at least an hour till you get even to the front of the line to get on the bus, or you can go right here. It's a 1.5 mile walk. They did the walk. They got lost. There's no one around. It's dark. Fortunately, some local couple picked them up and dropped them off at a local station. But the only complaint I have, and it was known, is it is terrible getting in and out. And so it took about 2 hours to get back downtown.
I mean, it's in a beautiful neighborhood, which is the one saving grace there, right? So it's not like it's in a dangerous part of town. But it is – the one thing about California to me that's so weird is how dark it gets. Like, I know they just don't have the street lights, whatever else. They're all saving energies out there, the granolas. But, I mean, like, it gets – when it gets dark, man, it is dark. All right, Pacers, Cavs tonight, Gamebridge Fieldhouse Files, where Scott Agnes will have all of the coverage. Appreciate it, Scott. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Jake. Thanks.
Again, Scott Agnes joining us on the program. If you are just joining us on the show.
Where have you been?
Thank you, Eddie. The owners of the Indianapolis Colts, all three Irsay daughters, issuing a statement today that basically was a statement of summary of what was said yesterday. And I think that, to me, is the part that is the most peculiar. Because unless they felt like that press conference just didn't stick, and certainly if they read the comments and listened to the radio or looked on social media, it didn't stick. You know what I mean? Simply didn't stick. Hey, Jake, this is from Mark. Somebody once told me hope is not a strategy. Before this past season, we had not much confidence in Richardson as our Colts quarterback, which is why the Colts went looking and settled on Daniel Jones, who had a less than stellar resume. And at the time, the discussion was that Jones would be competing for the job, not projected as a starter. Did anyone, including Ballard, know that Daniel Jones would morph into what he did? I think not. The Colts got fortunate with Daniel Jones. Why weren't the Colts looking for a quarterback when Richardson got hurt the first time when he was running the ball? I understand that some picks work out better than expected, like Brock Purdy, but someone on the 49ers staff had to have known that he was worth drafting. Have we heard from anyone on the Colts staff that they believe in Riley Leonard being a year older, who was taken in round 6 in 2025? I think they believe in Riley Leonard as the backup because they believe in Daniel Jones, and that's the thing. Thank you for the text, Mark. The question is, are you hoping Daniel Jones is for the future what we saw through the first 10 games? Because, or pre-injury. I go back to, he was phenomenal. Daniel Jones, and I'm pulling for the guy. Daniel Jones was effective. He was seemingly an extension of Shane Steichen and what Steichen had designed. And for Shane Steichen to be a quarterback whisperer, I think we saw it with Daniel Jones. Now, it's a little peculiar to me, and we haven't gotten into this a lot because it's kind of water under the bridge, but the way that Riley Leonard looked, and I know the second half he was going against third stringers. I get it. But even in the first half, at that time when the Houston Texans were seemingly going into a game knowing they had to get a win, by halftime they knew the Jacksonville result, and so it was a moot point. But Houston going into that game seemingly was all pushed in. And Riley Leonard looked pretty effective, which makes you wonder. And Phillip Rivers was not the reason that the Colts lost the games they did. It was the defense against San Francisco, and it was just kind of quirky stuff against Seattle. So Phillip Rivers wasn't the problem. Don't get me wrong there. But what I'm saying is, if you have a guy that did show you something that was drafted and is on your roster and, more importantly, is part of your future plan, and yet you weren't confident putting him in a game that mattered, then what gives you the confidence that you have the ability to see talent and develop it? But maybe that did awaken them enough where they say, okay, Riley Leonard is not the guy that is going to be a starting quarterback for us in the future, but he is a guy that we can use as a depth piece moving forward, and that makes Richardson even that much more expendable. Now, if Daniel Jones is not able to play effectively in week 1 or 2, does Riley Leonard become your short-term starter, or do you wait, and I believe this will happen, do you wait until the end of the training camps for a quarterback release, and then you sign yourself a Jake Browning, a Joe Flacco, somebody that's an 11th hour release that has NFL multiple game start experience and is the football equivalent of Micah Potter for the Pacers or Garrison Matthews for the Pacers, a guy that is a short-term rental, but you put him in there. And then you have Leonard simply as your end-of-game quarterback or your mid-season one-game donut tire quarterback. Or you continue to have Leonard as, say, your emergency quarterback, et cetera, while you allow him to develop because you're still not ready for him to be the consistent number 2. JMV's in the building. We'll find out what he's got going on. We'll do it as part of the crossover, brought to you by Love Heating and Air, love-hvac.com, 317-353-2141, the telephone number for that. Quick show announcement. Want to let you know, Thursday I mentioned Anthony Thompson will join us, 1 o'clock, former IU great that also worked in the athletic department. That will be on Thursday. Dave Revson on Friday. It was to really ramp up kind of our pregame coverage for Indiana. Also on Thursday from 5 until 7, I'll be at Axel's Garage on Carrollton, 900 North, or 901, I believe it is, North Carrollton, but over off Mass Ave, as part of our Mick Ultra Mini Hoops Challenge. Would love to see you. Our friends from Zinc will be there. They're awesome dudes and ladies, and we will also be there. Our Mini Hoops Challenge brought to you by Mick Ultra. Come out, have a Mick Ultra, and take part in the Mini Hoops Challenge. And if you have the high score, you will advance, go into the finals with your chance for tickets to Milwaukee to see the Blue and Gold and the Bucks coming up in February, courtesy of Mick Ultra. Hey there, it's Jake Query for Game Day Men's Health. Guys, think about it. Brand new year, New Year's resolutions. You want to get healthy. You want to get in shape. And you got all kinds of people giving you advice. Listen, why not go to the advice that is the best advice from Game Day Men's Health? And by that, I mean, why not go talk to somebody who is an expert and a professional within the area? Get stronger and healthier by taking control of your life at Game Day Men's Health. And think about this. All of their prescriptions come from FDA-approved pharmacies, ensuring safety and the highest standard of care. And at Game Day Men's Health, you are going in and you are talking to professionals within the health industry. So you're not going and talking to one of those fly-by-night pharmacy type things. No, this is, and I'm talking about testosterone replacement. I'm talking about peptide therapies. I'm talking about ED treatments. All of it done right there in-house, Game Day Men's Health, locally owned and operated and done under the watch, the care, and the consultation of health professionals. Game Day Men's Health, new to Indianapolis, and that should be your New Year's resolution of getting back in shape. Find out all the information you need at GameDayMen'sHealth.com.
Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
You know, there's always been the urban legend that ZZ Top was named after two brands of rolling papers, Zigzag and Top Papers. I have no idea if that's true or not. I think it's probably not true. I think it's been debunked, but I've always enjoyed that urban legend. Hey, Jake. This from Joe White. Do you know if Carlie Irsay-Gordon, obviously married, has, and by the way, I did see somebody that said that Carlie Irsay is only there because she married into money. I mean, even if you're somebody that people expect to say dumb things, like research a little bit before you say something that stupid. She is the daughter, not that it matters, but she didn't marry into money. Jake, do you know if Carlie Irsay-Gordon has a relationship with a football guy that she can confide in, bounce ideas off of, get advice from? And by relationship, I realize he means like a trusted, personal friendship, business relationship. Yeah, she works in a building of them. I mean, honestly, and I get what Joe's asking. And I don't know if outside of, it's a very fair question of, you know, is there somebody that a close friend of her father's, you know, maybe like a Tony Dungy. I would imagine Tony Dungy is somebody that she could call. That's the first name that came to mind. I have no idea what her relationship was. You know, one thing about her, Bill Polian, yeah, another name that you would think that she, you know, someone like that, right? She strikes me as, and I don't know her. None of us do, which is why yesterday's press conference I thought was so important. And I felt bad for her in this sense. You can have all the money in the world. You can have all the, you know, expertise on any line of work in the world. But speaking in front of people is hard. My number one fear in life is public speaking. My number one fear. I get up before, and I've had to do it many a time, emceeing events or doing, you know, things like that. I don't sleep the night before, but I speak for a living.
Sleep?
Huh?
You sleep in general?
Fair point. But I did not sleep well at all on Sunday night. It was awful. But what I'm getting at is, you know, the reality being that most people, that's a very nerve-wracking situation. And she's not used to doing that. And I did feel bad because I think she was in that situation pretty nervous. You know, you noticed how many times with almost every question, she asked for the question to be repeated or for it to be clarified. And I think it's because it did kind of feel like a presidential debate where you knew that the person up there had rehearsed or been going over like what answers they're supposed to give in the situation. And it kind of felt like she was going through it, trying to anticipate what answers she was supposed to give in that situation. And I just don't think that any of it stuck with people. People were wanting an explanation that made them feel better about why Chris Ballard is being brought back. And I am all for giving people the proper length of time to let stuff develop. I am all for benefit of doubt. I'm all for second chances. This is the same thing over and over again for like the fifth time. Honestly. I mean, I know that Andrew Luck retired. Okay, great. Fine. Even with that, you go out and you select Carson Wentz, and it doesn't work out, and so you get another opportunity. and you go with, and I don't even, hell, it's been so many quarterbacks, I don't even remember the order of them. But you go with Phillip Rivers, and you thought you were going to get 2 years, and you only get one, even though you got the second one like 6 years later for a third of it. You go with, the Matt Ryan one might be the most egregious of all, because if you recall, they signed Matt Ryan. Can you look up, Eddie, the date that of when they announced they were signing Matt Ryan? I mean, it had to have been if the training if they reported to camp in like late July, August, they had to have signed Matt Ryan in like April or May. I mean, it literally, you were thinking, what is going to happen here? And then it just fell into their lap. And Matt Ryan comes out, and then you realized, oh gosh, there was a very clear and definitive reason why this guy was available. He is cooked. I mean, he was D-O-N-E done.
So they had the introductory press conference of March 22nd.
Okay, so I mean, look how long after.
He was signed a month before that in April.
A month after, you mean? Oh, you said,
sorry.
So
No, that
May
doesn't make
20.
sense.
So May. He was signed in May?
Hold on.
Either way, my point being, it was literally like they'd gone through the draft. That's my point. They'd gone through the draft. They'd gone through, and it was like they still don't have a quarterback. And then they ended up, Matt Ryan was like this miracle thing. And we can sit here and say, as people said to me, with Richardson, the most important draft pick that you had to make was Anthony Richardson. The most important. The most important thing that you had to do was get a franchise quarterback. The most important thing of any general manager, if it's on their timeline, is if they have to select a franchise quarterback. And they kicked the can, and they went with Matt Ryan, and they went with Phillip Rivers, and they went with all these veterans, and they did things like trading away a first-round pick for DeForest Buckner. Very good player, don't get me wrong. Very good player. Played in a playoff game, right? In his time in Indianapolis, which may not be coming to an end. But that year when they traded that first pick, could have used that on Justin Herbert. That would have been nice. Right? Didn't like Jordan Love. Chris Ballard didn't like Jordan Love. Sam Bradford. When Sam Bradford was at Detroit, Chris Ballard's like, if Sam Bradford's great, why did he win more games in Detroit? Kept kicking the can on the quarterback, and then when it came down to it, yes, you could sit here and say, well, yeah, but when he selected Anthony Richardson, only Will Levis was available. You make availability. The Houston Texans are getting ready to go into the playoffs as a sneaky AFC favorite, perhaps, with a stud defense and a good quarterback. Maybe not great, but a good, solid quarterback in C.J. Stroud, ball placement specialist by his own terms. And C.J. Stroud was available because the Houston Texans traded with Arizona and moved up. They made their own fate. They made their own destiny. They sought it out. They were proactive. And the Colts are always too late reactive. And every single thing that Chris Ballard has been in charge of, more often than not, he's had to then go and do a make good on it and be reactive. Had to react to Josh McDaniels backing out of the job. Had to react to Phillip Rivers not giving them a second year. Had to react to Matt Ryan not being able to play. Had to react to Daniel Jones going down, which, again, I understand that this year the season might have been derailed by that. But you can't pin that as your excuse when you told me at the other bookend of your career that a team is about more than one player. If a team is about more than one player when it comes to success, you can't pin the failure of a team on one player going down. That's my thing. And I think people now have been sold the same bill of goods, the same BS. They've been smelling the same smoke and finally learned this ain't barbecue in the backyard, it's an incense stick. And people in this town are smarter than that. They finally now are over it because they've been hearing the same excuse every single year. And the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. And it just feels like, I hope I'm wrong, and I will absolutely stand for the mountaintops. We don't have mountains in Indiana, but if we did, if you drive and you're looking at the clouds on the horizon, you can pretend it's mountains. I will stand for the mountaintops and tell you I'm wrong if a year from now we're not having the same conversation, but it feels like we are. Because what evidence do we have that it's going to be different? 70, 78, and 1. Bottom line. JMV with the crossover. We'll find out what he's got cooking next.
This is Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
It is the crossover, brought to you by the good guys at Love Heating and Air. Little golden earring in the background there, John.
Lead singer passed away last year. We had a lot of musicians, unfortunately, leave us in 2025. Very sad.
Who covered this song?
That would be Twilight Zone.
That's
or no,
Golden
I mean,
Earring also.
Radar
That's
Love. White Lion?
Correct.
Yeah.
I loved
White
Lion.
Lion. Yeah. I was thinking of Twilight Zone and Golden Earring from the 80s, too. But, yeah, White Lion. Did a good job with it.
I was a big fan of White Lion. Little Fighter was a great song from White Lion.
When the children cry.
There you go.
Yeah, that'll bring everybody down.
White Lion was awesome. JMV is here. It is the crossover brought to you by the good guys at Love Heating and Air, love-hvac.com. The website, 317-353-2141. In your trips doing the show on the road, you've been to Axel's, right?
Where?
Axel's, over by the garage. 901 Carrollton, I believe, is the address.
I do not think I've been there.
I'm going there as part of the Mick Ultra
Good for
Mini Hoops
you.
Challenge with
That's
our
good.
friends
I
from
told
Zinc
you.
coming
I
up on
talked to
Thursday.
Jim Jr. last week. They're loving it, man. They're loving what you're doing right there.
Listen, the guys at Zinc and the
Yes.
gals at Zinc, they're awesome.
I love them.
Awesome
Had a
people.
relationship with them for so many years, and you're not going to find a better group of folks. And you know this too, Jake. They're not only good as partners in what we're doing in business stuff, but they're just good to hang out with, which makes it even better. Yep.
That's what makes it fun being out there. John, obviously you and I have talked since, but we haven't talked on the air about it. Yesterday at this time, we were still sitting there tap dancing, waiting for the press conference to begin. It then did begin. You had a chance to kind of rehash on it yesterday, but getting more into it today, and then the statement today. I thought the statement that came out from the Colts basically was their way of saying, yeah, that probably didn't stick yesterday.
Yeah, and I said yesterday that would have been better off and not to trot her out there and have her, read off cards and answers and such, and, basically go completely against the decision that she ultimately made coming up this season for this organization, was to just put out a statement and let everybody read it. And everybody would still go at it, but you wouldn't have the spoken word, and it wouldn't seem like that you're reading off a teleprompter the entire time. And the message was not going to be delivered in a positive way, no matter what, for most around here. But, yeah, that yesterday was not good. Not good at all. And as you mentioned, you can tell by what they did in their response today.
I mean, that is what I took from that, of them sitting that, of, you know what, we didn't stick the landing. But
well, they haven't stuck the landing in a long time now.
I mean, is there any doubt in your mind? I'm not trying to put words in your mouth here.
Yes.
So I'll put it to you this way. It is my belief, and then you feel free to disagree with me. It is my belief that there is no sign to tell you anything other than we are going to be right back in the same situation a year from now.
There is zero reason to believe, and that's why I give props to this fan base, because even that Jacksonville game, when there was nothing to play for, they all still came out, all still showed out. That was good. If you still have interest in this team, more power to you right now. But, yeah, I mean, you're kind of looking at the same thing over and over and over again. And here we go.
I mean, but here's the other thing. Is there really, and I'm saying this somewhat rhetorically, if you are the Colts as an organization and you know that Jacksonville game is the indicator of it and people are still coming out regardless, other than your own pride, what reason is there to turn it around?
I would like to think, and I know that some position them as being this evil group that just wants to take your money, but they don't want to look like that.
Well, so,
they
Chris
don't
Ballard
want to
and
look
Shane
like
Steichen
that.
don't.
I mean, this is, you remember, you and I were both here in the 80s, and the only thing that was of redeeming quality was the fact it was new and it was fresh, and you had an NFL team. Otherwise, it was sucky. It was awful, and it is eerily similar to what we're going through right now, without Duke Tomato songs or, dudes abstaining from sex until they win a game. And some of those ugly-ass dudes would do it anyway because they weren't going to get it.
Like lifting trucks and stuff like that.
Zoop selling tickets. That's before the blackouts.
That's right.
Yeah, he's down there lifting tractors on his neck.
Touchdown Monkey and Ray Compton juggling knives. Those are the days, man. I'm telling you, the beauty of it was the days of the the Kroger posters. I remember somebody making like a 6-foot-long Johnny Cooks poster off of a paper airplane off of Johnny Cooks Kroger poster and landing that bad boy on the 10-yard line when they're down 31-0, the Dolphins. That was the highlight of the game.
That
you know
was
what I mean?
it. Yeah, trotting out Mark Patrick as Warren one more time to do something.
That's right.
Back in the day. I mean, it was funny what you had to do, and then it wasn't about winning, wasn't about results. And we haven't seen it here over this span be about results. The decision Sunday, not about results. It was about results from September and October. And, you know, even in my whole sucky existence doing this, I can probably find a day or two where I was pretty decent, right? I mean, overall, pretty awful, but a day or two when I was pretty decent. And that's exactly what the Colts have done and Carlie Irsay-Gordon has done. You have highlighted a couple of months in the season where in the last 9 years you were decent and you're thinking that's real, and in fact, it's not.
My whole sucky existence, James, you said. What's lined up on the big show today?
We're going to go. I haven't talked to Denary in a while. Speaking of sucky existence right now, losers of
Not
12
Chris,
straight?
the Pacers, right?
Not Chris. Chris is an award winner.
That's right. I saw
Yeah.
that.
The award. Have you ever won that award before?
No, what it's he, James Boyd, and who was the third
Rob
one that won?
Blackman.
Rob Blackman.
Boilermaker voice. I won it in 2000, oddly enough, when there was no sports because of COVID. So they go, we got to give this thing away somehow. Let's give it to this clown. And
What
you know, it's funny.
organization is it?
I'm glad that they recognized James because we were at Emmis and nobody recognized me because Pat Walsh was afraid I was going to ask for a raise.
Well,
you'd have to take back some of his bedazzled jeans, find a couple of couch cushion dimes to give me.
Grecian formula too, right?
Oh yeah.
Listen,
he found that. He found gallons of that.
I've never won any broadcast award at all, ever.
Yeah, it's that. Yeah,
Never won one. I've never even been. I got nominated once for a Spectrum Award.
Well, and I call that around here. I call that the world's most glorified doorstop or paperweight.
Right.
Yeah, the hell with that.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, yeah, that's stupid.
No one knows that I do a show, so they'd have to know that.
I'm right there with you. I was barely known, but I just had to go. I think what they did
I thought
was
they just give those awards to Don or Mark Boyle every other year.
Yeah,
right?
they could and they should because we're talking about very accomplished, very professional people, unlike me. So,
Or me.
you know, it's unsurprising. If there was a Jackass Award, you know, I'd win that
It
every
is
year.
pretty cool that you would win Sportscaster of the Year in a year that there's no
I know, and
sports.
isn't it great? Yeah, we got to find somebody. Let's get this guy.
It's like, hey, we gave this award for best crowd management to the guy for 2020 when nobody could go anywhere.
Here we
for
go.
restaurants in March of 2000.
Right, way to go. The greatest mask wearer of all time. There he is,
That
coming
is
in.
beautiful. All right, John's up next. We will send it out to him here in just a couple of minutes, and Chris Denary will be on the program with them. Again, as I'd mentioned, coming up on Thursday, 1 o'clock, Anthony Thompson will join us. Dave Revson, I believe, on Friday as well, as we really do kind of start to turn things a little bit towards Indiana, and it is still surreal, knowing that Indiana is going to be playing in the Peach Bowl. You know, one of the weird things about that is the thought of, as I mentioned last week, I remember watching that 87 game at Michigan State, knowing that the winner would be going to the Rose Bowl. Michigan State won that game, and the consolation prize for Indiana was the Peach Bowl. So now to know that you win the Rose Bowl in order to go to the Peach Bowl does, in fact, feel a little bit surreal and bizarre. But we will certainly start to turn our attention towards that in this, historic time for IU football. 2 wins away from a national championship and 2 wins away from becoming the first team in college football history to go 16-0. Clemson was the first to go 15-0. Now, with the chance to add an extra game to that for 16th. Eddie, what do we have lined up for tomorrow on the big program?
I think Brett Lewis will join us from the NFL
Nice.
Network, and we'll talk probably a lot, IU, Oregon, and NFL as well, and maybe Joel A. Erickson.
And we will also, and by the way, we're hoping and keeping our fingers crossed that the helium tanks are gone tomorrow, right?
Let's hope.
What's that?
I did. Stephen Holder sounded like Webster.
He did.
I didn't know what you're talking
He
about because
did.
I'd never heard it before, and I go, that's what you're talking about right there.
That's exactly right. All right, we will be back with you. We'll talk Pacers Cavs as well. That tonight at the Field House. John is up next. I thank you for listening to Query & Company.